Last November, I had a moment where everything in my life felt very fragile, as if it was just passing by. I felt like I couldn't actually hold on to anything, and that everything was just happening without my interference or without me actually noticing or doing anything about it. And while this applied metaphorically to people, to time, to places, even, it also felt really true in the sense of the things that I was doing. Everything that I was interacting with mostly was online in a space that I couldn't really access, I could just edit. So I felt like everything was really out of my control. And I felt this very acutely with photos, but also with music, also with movies. Because I think up until this point, we're used to owning these things, not only in an ownership kind of way, but also in a physical kind of way. Like we used to own CDs and we used to own photo books. But now everything is kind of in this digital space. And I had this frightening thought that if something were to happen tomorrow, which was unprecedented, like someone for whatever reason decides to attack Apple headquarters, then all of the photos that I have for the last 7 to 8 years would just be gone. I don't have them saved anywhere else. I'm just trusting Apple with basically all of my memories of my life. And I mean, what would I do if I didn't have any access to it? I really don't have any control even about whether or not I would have these photos in the future. I'm trusting the fact that they'll exist forever because that's the promise of the digital space, which I think is very different than how things used to be before. And this transition into the digital space, I think, has really made a difference in how we interact with the world. I found myself thinking back again and again about photos in this way, and I found it really concerning that things could happen and I would not have any of them. And I understand that this is like a very apocalyptic and unrealistic kind of vision, but I mean, a lot of things seem apocalyptic but then actually happen. And to kind of make myself feel better about all of this, I started journaling, and not only just writing, which I had been doing in the past, but also scrapbooking, like printing out actual pictures and then sticking them. And I also started using my Polaroid way more, where I would like take pictures of my daily life almost. Earlier, I would use my Polaroid only on like special occasions and things like that. But now I just started archiving everything in my daily life, like things I'd been doing, coffee places I go to, just my college campus in general. And I found something very calming in this, both in the action of actually scrapbooking, but also just archiving it in this way. And I felt like, in a weird way, I was leaving something behind for people to find. And I have this recurring thought a lot, even when I'm reading. Like, reading is one of the last things in my life that is still physical in a sense, because I still choose to buy books instead of like read an online version. And I make notes in the corner. And when I'm making these notes, it's unlikely that I am ever going to come back and read them. But I do it because I have this sort of fantasy of someone else reading this book and with it my notes. Someone like maybe my children that I have one day, or like maybe it's in some kind of store that people pick it up. And I think this fantasy is really what makes me want to make these notes in the first place. And unknowingly, my mother recently told me that she actually does take books off my shelf and just she doesn't even read the book, she just likes reading my notes. And I think this is a very real example of what can happen if you actually make a physical difference, physical mark on things in the world. Like we do it because we want people to interact with it. And digitally, although we leave comments and all of these things, I think it just loses something. I mean, we've been wanting to leave a mark forever. Like the first cave paintings are a sign of this, right? Like I was here. But digitally, even though everything lasts forever, it just doesn't seem as real. And that's why I think so many of these things are so psychologically damaging and confusing because we can't really think of anything as real. Um, and I think that's really concerning. And I think it also has damaged what we think of as real, and what we think of as acceptable versus not acceptable. because we don't really have that connect to the real world the way we used to, especially for my generation, because we've grown up in this world and we've adapted almost to this way of living versus like actually going out in nature and living. And I recently read The Anxious Generation, which is a book about all of this, which is a book about the effect of growing up in social media and how it's kind of destroyed our relationship with the actual world. And it's a very like poignant fact about how our childhood and our personality has been completely impacted by this one piece of technology. And this book makes a really good point about how and why it's actually affected girls in a different, like girls more acutely, I would say. And it just, although I didn't think about it at the time, it felt so relatable because so many of my ideas have been shaped just because of what I think is real on social media. And even now, when I think I have more awareness about how things can be fake, it still is such a burden on my brain. And something that really stood out to me in the book is the fact that we're almost always aware of where our phones are. Like, even if I'm not looking at my phone, even if I'm not scrolling, because I've become more conscious about how much I scroll, I'm still aware of my phone as if it's a part of my body. And I'm still thinking, who has texted me? Has this person texted me? Who posted on their story? Who's watched my story? Etc., etc. And a lot of these things take up a portion of my brain almost perpetually, almost forever. And I think this burden on my brain about always thinking about two things, whatever I'm doing and also my phone, has really disconnected me from reality because I don't even think about these other things that I could be thinking about. And having this almost burden has completely ruined how I perceive reality. Like, I could be great friends with someone and my relationship with them could be fine, but if if they don't reply to my message for hours, or if they like someone's post who I don't really like, suddenly that relationship is completely different. Suddenly I perceive this relationship as somehow tainted because of these things that aren't actually real. Like, I'm now ascribing value to these things which are less real than the actual relationship we share in real life. But because of the importance we have given our phone and social media, these things have completely eroded reality for us. And this is how we perceive the entire world. We expect the world to be this airbrushed version. We don't think of it as something imperfect. And real things are imperfect, real things are messy. And not only do we expect like this airbrush on other people, but also ourselves. And it's like, how dare you be messy? How dare I not have everything figured out? And all of these things are because of our disconnect from reality. And I think I constantly ask myself and I wonder who I would be if social media just wasn't a thing. And I can't answer this question because my personality has been formed with social media. It's almost intermingled at this point. And I hate that. I hate that I can't separate the two at all. Like, I hate that it's become a part of me because I think the answer to who I would be without social media would be a really interesting one. And I think my relationships would be better. They would be less stressful and they would be less based on like these fictional things that have come to mean something to us. And I think as a society, if we go back to real things, maybe this would shift a little. And my original point of photographs, music, and movies, I think the reason why these things matter more than we've given it credit is because we need something real and material like our in order to feel like these things matter. Otherwise it seems too interchangeable. Otherwise it seems like I'm listening to this one song today and I'm going to forget about it tomorrow because it's not on the playlist, versus us actually having the physical track. Will, like, at least then there's a chance of us going back to it someday. At least there's a chance of us looking at that album and remembering the fact that we liked it. I think that is the main difference, that nostalgia and remembering is more possible with physical things rather than an online world, rather than a digital world. And while ownership can be seen as something very, like, why does it matter? Like, subscription model is fine. Like, this is actually saving us money and this is saving us space. I think we actually give away a lot more than we get in that bargain, because I think it was a big part of our personality to own these things, and it was a big part of our lives to own these things. And in that sense, the clutter and the mess is actually quite worth it. Like, it's even the hoarding means something. Um, so that's why I think it's so important that we have physical material versions of things rather than just live in a completely online digital space all the time.